So, David, hello.
Hello.
We've got to the part in your book where you talk about loving other people.
Yes.
And loving other people is a great challenge, isn't it? Some people are really easy to love, and some people are not so easy to love. I just wonder, what does Jesus say to us about loving other people?
I think that the interesting thing that Jesus says is that everybody needs to be loved. And loving is not a choice we have as Christians, but it's a duty and a responsibility. So we can't pick and choose. Everybody is included. And he tells some very powerful stories about that. The Good Samaritan, where a Samaritan helps a Jew who's been beaten up on the road, crossing a significant cultural and ethnic boundary, signalling that loving your neighbour includes people who you find difficult to love.
And of course we're commanded to love, aren't we?
We are.
Which kind of feels like a bit of a contradiction in that love is something I give, it's not something you can make me do. But God commands that we love.
Yeah, that is true, and God does that because it's good for us. It's good for us to love, it's good for the people we love, and it's good for us collectively to be committed to love.
So it's good for us to love. Can you say something more about that?
Well, I think we're designed to love. So the whole premise of the Christian faith is we're made in the image of God. So we fulfill our created purpose when we love. So there's something deeply intuitively in tune with what it means to be a human being if we're loving. And to be free. Freedom is often shaped in different ways. Sometimes it's shaped in a way that says to be free is to be free of responsibility. I can do whatever I want. But I say, from a Christian perspective, to be free is to be able to respond lovingly, whatever the situation, whatever the person, however difficult and irksome that can be sometimes. And we shouldn't forget, just picking up the idea that it's difficult, that we're following a crucified Messiah. So people ganged up on Jesus and took him to the cross, but he didn't stop trying his best. Well, not trying his best, but didn't stop loving them.
And I guess part of loving people is letting them be who they are. And we do have a bit of a tendency to put people in boxes.
We do. So we're very prone to label people. We like to it's a kind of very human tendency to want to summarise people in very pithy, you're a vicar, you're married, you have a child, it's kind of, you're a mother. Those labels are obviously true, but people are much bigger than that. And when we look at our own internal life, we realise how complex we are. If we're listening to ourselves sometimes, different responses we have to what's going on. We're not simple, and nobody's simple. So I think we've got to steer clear of thinking we've got people boxed up, and should always be prepared to be surprised.
Well, I guess people are just a never-ending mystery, aren't they?
They are.
Even people you know quite well, actually, you can discover you don't really.
Yeah, we find new things about them, and I think we're also a mystery. We're a mystery ourselves. So in terms of our own understanding of ourselves, that shifts. Certainly has for me over the years. So who am I? That question we ask ourselves sometimes. That changes over time. And I think we've got to give people the space to grow and change. They're not going to stay exactly the same. You won't be the same tomorrow as you are today because you've experienced today.
This conversation will have changed my life.
It will.
In some sense.
In some sense. For both of us.
Yes.
For both of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Exodus chapter 3, the burning bush, and Moses sees the burning bush, he goes across to the burning bush. Intrigued by the mystery of that, why isn't it being consumed by the fire? God speaks to him and he says, "Here I am." So whenever we encounter somebody, there is that sense of, here I am, how can I lovingly respond to this person in front of me?
Yeah, that's interesting that how often people try to give love which is actually not given in a way that somebody can receive or understand, or even that connects with their world.
That's so true.
And
yes.
Here I am.
Yeah.
requires that you understand me, Sarah, not that I become the Sarah that David can relate to.
Very true.
Yeah, very.
Yes.
It's a strange thing. Isn't
It's a
it?
strange thing, but I think learning what it means to love this individual will vary depending on the individual.
Mm.
So sometimes we need to ask, you wouldn't ask it'd be hard to ask that particular question, how do I love you? That's maybe feels a bit too personal. But thinking it through, and maybe, how can I help? How can I be useful? What do you want me to do now? Those are the kind of questions you might ask in a church meeting or a church event or at home, in the kitchen, whatever it might be. How can I help?
Yes.
So you're waiting for the other person to tell you rather than assuming, presuming.
Yes, and cross-culturally,
Yeah,
it's a really important question, isn't it? 'Cause
it is.
we can misunderstand each other so
You
easily,
definitely can.
and things can be interpreted as antagonistic, which are meant
Yes.
as love,
No, you're right.
but because the culture's so different, that's just not heard.
Yeah. I also think that kind of "here I am" statement that Moses makes is when we also make that when we're encountering people, and it's a reference to God. So it's a kind of listening dimension to this encounter with other people, listening to God to discern what do I need to do now to express love.
So we talked a little bit a few minutes ago about loving your enemy.
Yes.
Or loving people you don't like. I can't remember the
Yeah,
words
no,
we exactly
yeah.
used. But, I mean, that's a really tough gig, isn't it? The people who you don't like, but maybe even more difficult, who don't like you really, won't let you into their space.
Yeah.
What does that kind of love look like, and how do you summon up the kind of presence of, I don't know, mind, or maybe the presence of heart and will to love in those circumstances?
Well, I think you're right, it's not easy. It's very difficult. I think certainly if I look back at my life, and I can think of one or two people I found very difficult to relate to in a loving way. And then I found praying for them helps. So, and just not giving in to the kind of thoughts you'd sometimes have about those people. Wish they'd disappear, wish they weren't around. And trying to work out that difficult question. What does it mean to love somebody who doesn't like me? And that might well be giving them the space to not like you.
Yes, and leaving them alone.
Accepting
completely.
that, yeah, okay, I accept that you don't like me, but I'm still going to be favourably concerned about you, and just keeping that disposition. Otherwise, their antagonism to you affects your humanity, I think. Otherwise you get caught up in this kind of slightly antagonistic, you can get to this kind of, the dissonant relationship, you can get this kind of argy-bargy mentality. Yeah.
So almost the one of the protective mechanisms in a situation of enmity is to keep on loving.
I think that's good to keep it open. They might want to have nothing to do with you, but from your side, keeping it open, not closing it down. If you want to, I'm open to reconciliation. I'm open to exploring how we can relate differently. And in the meantime, if you can, praying for them. I think Jesus says that explicitly, doesn't he? That pray for those who persecute you. Pray for your enemies.
So where's the balance in all that between being really badly hurt by someone and just keeping a distance, because what is the point of putting your hand in the fire again?
I think that's a very fair point. So if it's not safe to be around somebody, keep your distance. You've got to. I think the chapters in my book are kind of interwoven in a way. So the self-love chapter kind of comes into play here. We don't want to be in a place that's not safe. We've got to look at our own internal resources and what's happening to us. But that keeping some distance doesn't mean we're not again, it's that favourable disposition. I want the best for somebody, even though I find them extremely difficult, or they've wounded or hurt me. And so I think forgiveness is something different to reconciliation. So if somebody's a dangerous person for you, physically or mentally dangerous, you need to keep your distance because it's not safe.